Hey everyone, Midits here. 2026 is the 30-year anniversary of Pokémon, so there's bound to be some new games that come out this year. Much has happened across the previous 9 generations, making it hard to piece everything together. In today's video, we're going to go over the complete timeline from Red and Blue to Legends ZA. The lore gets kinda complicated, but I still hope you enjoy, and let's get straight into this. The first thing I need to explain is that there isn't just one Pokemon timeline, there's 3. The existence of alternate timelines was confirmed in the Generation 6 games, where remakes such as Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire took place in a different universe from Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald. So far, the generation with the most remakes is Gen 1, so we have seen 3 unique versions of the events of Red and Blue. The first timeline is the simplest, consisting of the original Game Boy era Pokemon. Events begin with Pokemon Red, Blue, and Yellow, which tell the same story. 2 kids, Red and Blue, get starter Pokemon and begin collecting gym badges across Kanto region in order to enter the Pokemon League. We follow Red as he's also attempting to complete the Pokedex, which was the goal of Professor Oak, who gave the two of them their Pokemon. Both Red and Blue collect the 8 badges, with Red encountering an organization called Team Rocket multiple times across his journey. Team Rocket steals Pokemon and uses them to their own benefit, but when the head of their team, who's also the 8th gym leader Giovanni, loses to Red, he disbands the team. Red successfully defeats the Elite Four, but Blue made it first, so they fight for the title of champion. Red wins, and that's where the story ends for 3 years. 3 years later, in the game's Pokemon Gold, Silver, and Crystal, we are introduced to a trainer named Gold in the Johto region. Gold runs an errand for the region's professor, Professor Elm, and is given a starter Pokemon for this task. As Gold returns, Gold faces a trainer named Silver, who stole one of the starters from Professor Elm's lab. When Gold returns, Elm tells him to start traveling across Johto to collect the region's 8 gym badges. Team Rocket returns during Gold's travels, as the organization attempts to reform after Giovanni disbanded the team. Gold faces both Silver and Team Rocket multiple times across his journey, with the latter culminating in Team Rocket's return failing, as they are unable to reconnect with Giovanni. Gold gets all the badges and faces the Johto Elite Four, becoming champion after defeating the current champion and previous Elite Four member Lance. This story doesn't end here, however, as Gold travels to the Kanto region and collects all 8 badges. After accomplishing this, Professor Oak allows Gold to enter Mount Silver, a location that only most powerful trainers can handle. At the top of this mountain is Red, and the game, along with this timeline, ends with their battle. These timelines share many similarities, so I won't discuss some games again unless there are noticeable differences to mention. Around the same time as the remakes, Fire and Leaf Green, the events of Pokemon Ruby, Sapphire, and Emerald take place. Now, for Generations 3 and 4, the third versions of these games have some more differences in the story, and since the third versions are the refined and definitive editions of these games, I'm going to be basing the plot off of Emerald. Also, going forward, the name of the protagonist and occasionally one of the rivals will be based on the gender you choose at the start of the game. I'll say their names at the start, but then I'll refer to them as the player. Brendan or May move to the Hoenn region and get a starter to help the region's professor, Professor Birch, who is attacked by a wild Pokemon. The player also meets Professor Birch's child, who will be the player character you didn't pick at the start of the game. The player sets out to collect the Hoenn gym badges, and early on meets a boy named Wally. Wally is a sickly kid who intends on becoming a strong Pokemon trainer, regardless of the obstacles in his way. 2 new organizations appear in Hoenn, Team Magma and Team Aqua. Team Magma wants to use the legendary Pokemon Groudon to increase the amount of land in the world, while Team Aqua wants to use legendary Pokemon Kyogre to increase the amount of water in the world. The player encounters them several times, and both teams are able to summon their respective legendary Pokemon, but without the ability to control them. The player summons the legendary Pokemon Rayquaza, who stops the other two from fighting each other. The player faces Wally one more time, who has become significantly stronger since they first met, and the player becomes champion, defeating the Elite Four and the current champion, Wallace. The story in Hoenn ends with the player meeting and battling the previous champion of the Hoenn region, Steven Stone. Taking place 3 years later, roughly around the same time as Pokemon Gold, Silver, and Crystal, are the events of Pokemon Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum. The player begins their own journey across the Sinnoh region alongside their friend Barry after they use Professor Rowan's Pokemon to protect themselves. Professor Rowan's assistant will either be Don or Lucas, depending on which character is chosen at the start, and the other character will be the protagonist. As the player collects the gym badges, they meet many different people. There's Cynthia, the region's champion, who's also interested in ancient Sinnoh mythology, Team Galactic, an organization that plans on destroying the universe and recreating it in their image with the power of the legendary Pokemon Dialga and Palkia, and lastly, there is Looker, a detective who is investigating Team Galactic. Team Galactic acquires everything they need when their leader, Cyrus, is sent to the Distortion World by the legendary Pokemon Giratina. The player defeats Cyrus, which leads to the Distortion World being closed, with Cyrus choosing to stay inside. The player then faces the Elite Four and the champion Cynthia and becomes the region's champion. Unfortunately, the amount of time between Gen 4 and Gen 5 has never been confirmed, and it's been up to speculation. It seems to be a larger gap, as shown by a few examples. The Team Rocket Grunt, who stole a machine part in the Gen 2 postgame, appears again and has a son. The more important evidence is Caitlyn, who appears to be a kid or teenager in both Platinum as well as Heart Gold and Soul Silver, then returns in Black and White as an Elite Four member, with concept art saying that she's in her mid-20s. This is the best evidence that's given, so I'm going to say that it's been about a decade since Gen 2 and 4. Black and White follows either Hilbert or Hilda as the player starts their journey with their friends Charon and Bianca. The player encounters a new evil organization, Team Plasma, that believes Pokemon are being oppressed by humanity and should be freed. The player also meets N, who is the face of Team Plasma, and plans on becoming champion in order to convince humanity and Pokemon to separate. When the player defeats the Elite Four, they learn that N succeeded in his plan, and the two of them face each other using Reshiram or Zekrom, the region's legendary Pokemon. N is defeated, but both he and the player learn the truth. The person truly in charge of Team Plasma is Getsis, who raised N to do his bidding. While N truly believed what he was saying, Getsis wanted to rule the world by being the only person with Pokemon. The player defeats Getsis, and this entire situation leads to a change in N's perspective, as he sees that people and Pokemon truly do care for each other. Afterwards, the player faces the man who was champion before N, Alder, and wins. The story continues 2 years later with Black and White 2, which are sequels rather than enhanced versions. Either Nate or Rosa starts their journey getting Pokemon from Bianca, your former rival, who became Professor Juniper's assistant. During the player's travels to collect the gym badges, they see that Team Plasma has returned, disregarding their old ideology and going around stealing people's Pokemon. This includes the Purloin of the player's rival Hugh, who quickly resents Team Plasma. Team Plasma plans on using the power of the legendary Pokemon Kyurem for world domination, threatening to use its ice powers to freeze parts of the Unova region. Eventually, Hugh's Purloin, which has now evolved into a Liepard, is returned to him. It's discovered that Getsis is working with the newly reformed Team Plasma, and while N returns with his legendary to stop Getsis, this only makes things worse as Kyurem absorbs Zekrom or Reshiram based on the version of the game. Getsis, alongside Team Plasma, is once again defeated, and the player battles the current champion, Iris, and succeeds, and becomes champion. A lot of stuff happens in the post-game, although one looming mystery left unanswered is what happened to the previous protagonist from the first game. While not important to the story, I should mention the Pokemon World Tournament, where the player fights gym leaders and champions from across the series, including Red and Blue, who appear for the first time in 12 years chronologically since Heart Gold and Soul Silver. That concludes the second timeline, and while the first and second timeline being separate isn't confirmed, it certainly is with timelines 2 and 3. I've already been talking about these games in release order, so I'll keep doing that, but I will mention if we ever go back in time. Taking place around the same time as Black and White 2, X and Y follows either Caleb or Serena, who recently moved to a town in the Kalos region. They're given a starter by Professor Sycamore and begin their journey alongside their rivals, Shauna, Tierno, Trevor, and the character not chosen at the start of the game. One major difference between this timeline and the previous one is the introduction of Mega Evolution, a phenomenon where certain Pokemon can temporarily achieve a more powerful form when they have a strong bond with their trainer. The player encounters Team Flare, who are intent on destroying the world to create their own version of a better world. It is later revealed that philanthropist Lysander is the leader of Team Flare. While heading to Team Flare's secret lab, they meet AZ, the former king of Kalos, who has lived for thousands of years. When war broke out, his Floette died, and AZ attempted to bring it back using a device powered by the region's legendary Pokemon. Floette was brought back, but in his anger, AZ turned the machine into the ultimate weapon, which wiped out both sides of the conflict. Both Floette and AZ gained an extended lifespan, and Floette left AZ due to his actions. Team Flare plans on reactivating the ultimate weapon, but they are stopped by the player, with Lysander using the ultimate weapon to destroy itself, seeing no other option. The player defeats the Pokemon League and the region's champion Diantha, and the story closes with AZ finally reuniting with Floette after 3,000 years. Next up is Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, which I won't completely go over, but have some differences to discuss. Mega Evolution exists. Team Magma and Aqua use the correct orbs for their respective legendary Pokemon, summoning their primal forms. After becoming champion, the player works with a character named Zinnia and Rayquaza to prevent a meteor containing Deoxys from hitting the planet. Now, we don't know the exact years for most of the following mainline games, but we do know that Legend ZA takes place 5 years after XY, and that the other games take place within these 5 years, with Scarlet and Violet potentially taking place during the events of Legend ZA. However, while researching, I found that another Unova Elite Four member, Grimsley, shows when Sun and Moon takes place. As he returns in these games, concept art reveals that there's a 2-year time jump from Black and White 2 to Sun and Moon. Gen 7's plot will be based on Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, as these are the enhanced versions of the game. Either Elio or Celine moves to the Alola region, but instead of collecting 8 gym badges, they instead partake in 4 island challenges. Early on, they meet Hao, a friend and rival throughout the story. They also meet 2 siblings named Lily and Gladion, who are the children of Aether Foundation President Lusamine. There's also Team Skull, who later on attempt to steal a Pokemon Lily rescued that is nicknamed Nebby. This is revealed to have been orchestrated by Lusamine, who plans on using Nebby to open a portal to another dimension to face the powerful Ultra Beast Necrozma. Necrozma fights Nebby, which evolves into either Solgaleo or Lunala, and absorbs it. The player faces Necrozma's most powerful form and manages to save Alola. The player faces the region's Elite Four and their rival Hao in order to become Alola's first champion. In the post-game, the player fights Team Rainbow Rocket, alternate universe versions of every antagonist up to this point who were successful in their missions. They are defeated by the player and others, including a former member of Team Plasma, Colress. Before we move on now, there is one thing I want to mention. In Sun and Moon, we find out that Hoenn Battle Frontier Brain Annabelle fell through an Ultra Wormhole with amnesia. However, it's implied that this Annabelle is from the previous timeline where Pokemon Emerald took place, not Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. She vaguely remembers being part of the Battle Frontier, which doesn't exist during the events of Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, although admittedly, you could say that it was constructed later. The biggest piece of evidence, however, is that the Pokemon Emerald Frontier Brain theme plays when you fight her, despite the fact that the song was remade in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. We also see Looker return for a brief moment in Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire with amnesia, potentially having encountered the same situation. This is important and will be brought up again. Also, I want to mention that both Red and Blue appear in this game, with this being the oldest we've seen the two of them so far. Let's Go Pikachu and Eevee takes the place of Fire and Leaf Green this timeline, although the story is kind of odd. Chase or Elaine replaces Red, while Trace replaces Blue. However, Red and Blue appear in the game as established trainers, while the events of their story are being played out by other people. Also, Green appears in the postgame, who I assume is an alternate timeline version of Leaf, similar to Golden Chris becoming Ethan and Lyra in Heart Gold and Soul Silver. Also, this is the introduction of Mega Evolution into Kanto. Next up is Sword and Shield, which takes place in the 3-year time period between Sun and Moon and Legends of Yi, as the events of this game are directly referenced. We follow a character named either Victor or Gloria as they begin to travel across the Galar region. The player's journey begins when they, alongside their friend Hop, get their starter Pokemon and encounter a mysterious Pokemon in a nearby forest. The champion plays a big role as he is Hop's older brother Leon. The player and Hop are endorsed into the Gym Challenge, where trainers collect 8 badges, and those who are successful enter a tournament to become the champion. Some other rivals include Bede, a strong trainer who is sponsored by Macrocosmos Chairman Rose, who also endorsed Leon, and there's also Marnie, who's supported by a rabid fans Team Yell. While researching with the professor's assistant named Sonia, we learn about the darkest day when the world was plunged into chaos until 2 legendary Pokemon saved Galar. The player completes the Gym Challenge and makes it to the finals in the tournament against Leon when disaster strikes. Wanting to secure an energy source for Galar, Chairman Rose summons Eternatus, starting the second darkest day. Using either Zacian or Zamazenta, the player stops Eternatus and eventually gets that battle with Leon, ending up victorious. There's more that happens in the post-game and DLC. 2 brothers attempt to ruin Zacian and Zamazenta's reputation by making them go mad. The player meets the former Galarian champion, and also meets Chairman Rose's brother. Brilliant Diamond and Shining Pearl take Platinum's place in the story, although they don't really change anything. Going far back in time, likely somewhere in the mid to late 1800s, is the story of Pokemon Legends Arceus. Rare Akari is sent back in time to the ancient Sinnoh region, back when it was known as Hisui. This was done by the legendary Pokemon Arceus, and they are told to catch every Pokemon. The player is brought in by Professor Laventon and is recruited by the Galaxy Expedition Team to study the region's Pokemon. The player faces noble Pokemon, stronger Pokemon created by rifts in space-time. The player also meets members of 2 clans, Diamond and Pearl clans, who worship the almighty Sinnoh, who either created time or space. These rifts get worse, however, in the player's exile. By meeting the legendary Pokemon of Azelf, Mesprit, and Uxie, the player is able to summon Dialga or Palkia, depending on the clan they chose, and stop the wormholes. In the post-game, players alongside a merchant named Volo search for the plates of Arceus. Volo then betrays the player, having an eerily similar goal of wanting to destroy the world and create a new one, this time with the power of Arceus. Volo is defeated, and after catching every Pokemon, the player battles Arceus, with Arceus giving a part of itself to the player in order to travel the Hisui region. One character who's not a major part of the story, but is important to the overall lore, is Ingo. In Black and White, brothers Ingo and Emmett held battles on the Unnovan subways. In Legends Arceus, he appears in Hisui with a faint recollection of the past, Then, in Legend ZA, it's revealed in the museum that he disappeared, saying it was time for him to return. There's also an NPC that mentions the battle subway returning, which implies that Ingo made it back home. This is clearly similar to what happened to both Annabelle and Looker, although Ingo's mention in Legend ZA means he arrived in present-day Timeline 3. Black and White haven't been remade yet, but when they are, this either means that Ingo and Arceus was from those future remakes, or he started out in present-day Unova in Timeline 2 and ended up in present-day Unova in Timeline 3. Either way, it's very interesting to see this little storyline that's persisted since the start of 3D era. Within the 3-year gap between Generation 7 and Legend ZA, but after Gen 8 is the story of Scarlet and Violet. Florian or Juliana began attending either the Naranja or Uva Academy in the Paldea region, where students must travel the region in search of their own personal treasure. Early on, the player meets legendary Pokemon, either Koraidon or Miraidon, who they travel with during the course of their journey. There are 3 plotlines followed with 3 characters. The player collects all 8 gym badges and battles the rival Nimona until they defeat the Elite Four and the region's champion Gira. Next, the player faces Pokemon powered by special ingredients called Herba Mystica alongside Arvin, who is using the ingredients to heal his injured Mabosstiff. Finally, the player stops Team Star, a group of school bullies, alongside Penny, who is revealed to have been the team's former leader before she realized the serious trouble that the group could get into. These stories culminate with the 4 of them entering a large crater in the center of the region, which leads to a place filled with powerful Pokemon called Area Zero. Either Arvin's mother or father, depending on the version of the game, was a professor who worked in Area Zero, with their whereabouts being unknown. In Area Zero, there are Pokemon species from either the distant future or past, and they learn that the same applies to Koraidon or Miraidon. They then learn that the professor has been dead for years, and that the professor they meet in Area Zero is an AI. The real professor created the time machine to bring the Pokemon, and to stop the machine, the player must defeat the AI. The base game ends here with more post-game and DLC content. A Pokemon battling tournament is created, and the player goes on a school trip to a faraway region which, based on its cultural inspirations, is likely near Johto and Sinnoh. The player also becomes an exchange student at the Blueberry Academy in the Unova region. Roughly around the same time as Scarlet and Violet is the most recent game in the series, Legend ZA. Paxton or Harmony arrives in Lumio City, which is currently being redeveloped after the events of X and Y, with wild zones being added to include Pokemon in the city. The player meets Tawny or Urbane, depending on the character chosen at the start of the game. The player gets a starter, is brought to a hotel owned by AZ and Fluette, who we see for the first time since X and Y, and joins the hotel's group called Team MZ. The player enters a citywide tournament where trainers who reach the highest rank will be granted one wish by Quasar Tico, the company behind Lumios' redevelopment. As the player progresses, they are recruited by Quasar Tico to deal with wild Pokemon that are suddenly mega evolving. The player surprisingly meets Lysander, who goes by L and has amnesia. Zygarde saved Lysander during the events of X and Y, but he is now also burdened with an increased lifespan, similar to AZ. The player discovers that a device called Angie has been causing the Mega Evolutions, that was also previously built by AZ, similarly to the Ultimate Weapon. The device fully activates, and Tawny or Urbane Mega evolves AZ's Floette in order to control Angie, but Floette loses control, leading to the player stopping the device with the help of Zygarde. AZ, a character introduced at the very start of this new timeline, passes away after Angie was destroyed. The player then wishes for the ZA Royale to continue indefinitely. There's DLC where the player meets Ansha, the daughter of former champion Diantha, who is traveling with Hoopa. Distortions also appear in Lumios, connecting it to an alternate version of the city. Ansha hoped to catch Rayquaza for her mother, but when the player catches it, she chooses to let them keep it. And that is where the story of Pokemon currently ends. That was a lot to go through. There are tons of characters, many of which we haven't seen in a while. There are small hints to secret storylines that are really interesting if you take the time to look at them. I admit that it might be fan service, but it's fun seeing the different games and regions connect, and old characters popping up again. Sadly, Nintendo has a history of avoiding continuity, but it's great to see it shine through in a series like this, with so much amazing world building. I hope y'all enjoyed today's video. If you did, check out some other content. If you really did, subscribe so that you know when future content comes out. I have a Patreon, and for $1 a month, you can support me and see my videos ad-free. That's gonna be it for now, and I'll see you all in the next one. Take care!